Mike Rogers is the Trump-endorsed candidate for U.S. Senate in Michigan, which is now an open seat. Mr. Rogers, how you doing, sir?
I am doing great, thank you, and a great win for Bernie yesterday in Ohio, and I think that portends great things up here in Michigan for sure.
I think so, right? Let's talk about the similarities. I'll ask you the first question I asked Bernie on Monday, which is, how do you explain such a massive shift from Democrat to Republican in your state?
I'll tell you exactly how. I mean, the most expensive vehicle now to operate in the state of Michigan in 2024 is your grocery cart. Almost $1,000 a month increase since Biden's been elected for everything from your bread and your eggs and your cheese to your gasoline. And gas is again spiking up, by the way, and that's all bad policies by Biden. When you look at the southern border, crime has come to Michigan. There is no southern border. We're on the border of Canada, and our problems are coming from the southern border. We have criminal cartel gangs operating in Michigan from Chile, doing these really high-end, sophisticated burglaries using jamming gear. They can even jam police radios. We had a 14-year-old assaulted by an illegal immigrant in my home county, not known for its crime rate. It is all the things that we talk about often are washing into middle-class families all across Michigan, and they're finally saying, oh, my Lord, enough is enough. Now, still going to be a tight state. Right now, polls show that I'm statistically tied with the likely Democrat nominee, and it'll tighten for sure. But I think people are finally saying, hey, enough of enough. And think of this. How often do you get an opportunity to say, okay, under President Trump, my 401k was bigger, my gas prices were lower, I had more income to spend on other things other than food, and my neighborhood was safe. And then you go to the Biden years and see all of that change, and now you get to say, okay, now you get to choose between two of these folks. I think that's what you see changing across the landscape.
Yeah, the A/B test is as clear as day.
Yeah.
So we spent a lot of time yesterday in Ohio talking about some factories that have moved to Mexico. And talked to these union guys who, my dad would be spinning in his grave if he knew I was voting for Republican, that sort of thing, right? I voted for Democrat all my life just because that's what I'm supposed to do as a union guy or whatever. How have you seen that shift over the years with the unions?
I think the UAW worker and auto workers in general, and we have some also non-union suppliers, tier 1, 2, and 3 suppliers here, so a big network of automotive-related jobs. I think they're starting to see a very clear difference. And we shouldn't underestimate. Most states won't have this kind of robust debate on the EV mandates. We will here in Michigan. It's 40% less labor. It's not necessarily better for the environment. And it puts a dependent on 1/7 of the United States economy on the Communist Party of China. 85% of everything processed that goes into that electric vehicle happens through China. And it's jeopardizing our national security. And so workers here see that, and they don't, nobody believes this is the right thing to do for the government to tell you what kind of car you drive. Matter of fact, we've been saying, my God, a government agent's going to show up at your house, pack up, put your gas stove and your gas water heater in the back of your F-150, and they're going to drive it off. This is just, I think, how fast the liberals in Washington, D.C. have pulled to the left is breathtaking, even to people who think that they're supposed to be voting Democrat every year because their union tells them. We're seeing a huge split in that coalition here in Michigan, and we're going to take advantage of it. And they love Donald Trump here, for sure.
What do you say to the union guy, that union guy who's fourth generation and always voted Democrat his whole life?
Vote for your pocketbook this time. Send the Democrats a message that they cannot take you for granted anymore. And that's exactly what's happening. Matter of fact, we're having black males in Michigan, around southeast Detroit, pulling away from the Democrat Party. You see what the Muslim coalition in Michigan, and we have several 100,000 Muslim Americans here in Michigan, starting to say, hey, wait a minute, this isn't working for me. So the big three coalitions for Democrats here in the state of Michigan are falling apart. And my argument to the union folks is, listen, by the way, if you care about the environment and on this EV mandate, the government's basically saying we're going to take 40% of your jobs and make you drive a car that you don't want to drive. We don't have to do it that way. One EV, about 4 tons of carbon out of the air. That same 500 pounds of material to make that one EV makes 90 hybrid cars, 140 tons of carbon out of the air. And, oh, by the way, you don't have to plug it in. And so I think that we keep talking to these folks about what is the better way forward, what's the best way for their economy. I mean, having 40% less labor, is that the right thing to do for a state like Michigan? Well, hell no, it's not. And by the way, you don't even have to do good things if carbon worries you in the air. Then there's a better way to do this and keep those UAW jobs. And so just keep repeating it and repeating. And Donald Trump's been fantastic on this. When he comes to the state, he takes it on. He punches them right in the face with real facts about how dangerous this is for our future and how you're endangering not only our economic prosperity, but our national security as well by making the Chinese the most important car makers in the world by mandating electric vehicles. And I think the UAW workers are starting to say, hey, wait a minute, this is not working for me.
Okay, all the lamestream heard in that answer was punch right in the face. Mike Rogers endorses punching people right in the face.
Not true. Not true.
That one, one gets spun
not
up.
Literally, figuratively.
Ridiculous that we even need to qualify. If we let the Chinese car companies move to Mexico and sell their cars here, will it be a bloodbath?
Oh, yeah, and this is what is so frustrating to me on conversations that Donald Trump has nationally. He likes to be, he likes to have those strong words to bring attention to an issue. Yes, it would. If you're an auto worker, if you're a second and third tier auto worker supplier here, you bet it does. It will be a bloodbath. That means your jobs are going away. Now, when you lose your job and your ability to take care of your family, I don't care what anyone says, that's a bloodbath. You're trying to figure out, what do I do? Where do I go? How do I feed my family? You bet. And so when people get their feelings hurt a little bit on something that will take away the livelihood of people who are earning a decent wage here in Michigan, well, shame on you. I mean, you ought to get out of your ivory towers out there in California and New York and come to see a state like Michigan where we actually get up and go to work every day. Pretty an amazing thing. It still happens in America. And so, yeah, I completely agree. And you have to understand the rhetoric that the president uses is trying to draw attention to something that will be devastating to certainly Michigan working families and across the country. That's why, China's, they're outsmarting us. They know they're building a product. So let me back up. Here's the national security piece. The Chinese Communist Party put graphite on their national security watch list, meaning at any time they could shut off the export of graphite if they think it's in their best interest. Well, guess what? 90% of the graphite, and by the way, if you want to build an electric car, you want to build out your electric grid, you need graphite. They can turn it off at any minute. Now, why in God's green earth would we mandate products that we would absolutely put ourselves under the thumb of the Chinese Communist Party National Security Network? I mean, it's just mind-blowing to me. So when the president uses a term like bloodbath, that's what he's talking about. He's like, hey, wait a minute. You are actually, making our national security more vulnerable, and you're definitely making our personal families' economic security more vulnerable. And so I think, again, I know people sipping wine and eating cheese cubes get their feelings hurt, but this is really an existential threat to working families earning a good wage in a place like Michigan.
You'd think we would have learned about that reliant on China thing during COVID. Alas, we perhaps have not learned that lesson, and we still are going to be more dependent on them for everything. It's crazy. We're talking with Mike Rogers. He is the Trump-endorsed candidate for Senate in Michigan and was on the House Intel Committee when he was in Congress, too, so could speak to that. There hasn't been a Republican senator in Michigan since one term in 1994, and then you got to go back to 1978. So there was a Republican that won in 1966 and then served all the way till 1978, and that was it. Other than that, it's been Democrat senators. Debbie Stabenow, she's the one on the way out. Let's talk about Trump for a minute. So, how do you? Because there's a bunch of Republicans winning, running. How do you get the Trump endorsement? You meet with them, talk with them. What was that like?
Well, I mean, first of all, and I think a lot of people don't understand this, that that Trump is looking across the board. So I am somebody, as chairman of that House Intelligence Committee, that found a way to cut 10% of that budget at the height of the Iraq and Afghanistan conflict. So I know, that people. Well, I won't even speak to the naysayers out there. We're going to need somebody that walks in on the very first day that understands how to do that. If we don't get spending under control in Washington, D.C., and not just, this can't be a slash and burn kind of thing. It has to be a restructuring on how government works in a modern way that costs less money, is more efficient, and oh, by the way, think of this, is taxpayer friendly. I mean, meaning customer friendly. Can you imagine that? And so if you start going down the list, tough on China, this was, I think, an easier decision than people think on why Donald Trump said Mike Rogers is the right guy to go back there. He's got 4 years. He needs somebody who can walk in the Senate right away and be an advocate for right-sizing government, for making sure our border is closed yesterday, how to do that, and then how to put in place to make our border more safer and more functional for the future. And we have a whole set of plans for that. We talked about, how you make sure this two-tiered justice system and how we get the Department of Justice back worrying about criminals and fentanyl and human traffickers than they do showing up at school board meetings. And there's no better guy in the world that can walk in and have those conversations than me, a former FBI agent, former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. And by the way, you didn't see all the problems you see today when I was chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. It just didn't happen. And so I think this is why Donald Trump understands and knows that he wants to be with a guy that has won a blue seat and made it red. Nobody else has done that. I know how to run in really tight elections. Yep, I've done that. I have cut government spending and government waste. Yep, have done that. I was really tough on the Chinese. Yep, have done that. And so when you start going down this list, to me, I think he said, I want somebody who's going to win, who's going to put a campaign together to win, and knows how to do the things that I want to get done and straightened out in Washington, D.C. That's how it happened.